Okay, we'll now move on to the last planning application for this evening, DED 8515, 623 to 625 Sydney Road, Brunswick, planning permit application MPS 2014 H27.
Thank you, Councillor. This is an application for the demolition of part of the existing buildings, the use and development of the land for an 8-storey building, plus basement car parking and rooftop terrace, containing shops and dwellings, a reduction in the car parking requirement, and a waiver of the loading and unloading of vehicles requirement at 623 to 625 Sydney Road in Brunswick. The site has a frontage of 12.8 metres, a depth of 49 metres and an overall area of 623 square metres. A pedestrian walkway is located along the southern boundary of the site, as marked by the dashed line to the left of the screen. It's located within the Brunswick Major Activity Centre and the Commercial 1 zone. The Design and Development Overlay, Schedule 18, or the proposed Design and Development Overlay, seeks a maximum overall building height of 19 metres. There's an aerial shot of the subject site with the walkway highlighted in purple along the southern boundary. The zoning of the site and the surrounding area within the Brunswick Major Activity Centre. So this application proposes an 8-storey building plus a basement level and a rooftop terrace. The application seeks to retain the front facade, seeks an overall height of 24.9 metres from the footpath on Sydney Road. 21 car parking spaces in a car stacker arrangement, 2 shops on the ground floor, 24 dwellings and balconies ranging between 7 and 68 square metres in area. At the basement level we have the car parking. At the ground floor we have the apartment foyer from the rear laneway. Moving up to the Sydney Road level where there are the 2 shops as well as an apartment facing Sydney, facing the rear laneway. And then from the second floor up we have the apartments. And then you can see from those floor layouts that the setback to Sydney Road increases as we move up the building. There's the Sydney Road elevation at the top of the screen, as well as the rear elevation at the bottom, and side elevations. The application was advertised and 3 objections were received. The main concerns related to concerns during construction, impact on the Sydney Road heritage streetscape, adverse visual impact, traffic management and impact on property values. The recommendation contained within the report includes a number of changes to the built form. The key changes include providing a minimum of 1 bicycle parking space per dwelling, retaining the existing building, the existing exterior walls and floors retained for a minimum depth of 5 metres from the Sydney Road frontage to retain the heritage, retain a heritage component of the building. The bedroom windows in apartments 404 and 504 provided with a light court with a minimum area of 9 square metres and a minimum width of 3 metres to comply with the Moreland Apartment Design Code. The balconies of dwellings 304 and 303 set back a minimum of 5 metres from Sydney Road, as well as a minimum setback of 14 metres for levels for the 4th and 5th levels from Sydney Road, as well as a Section 173 agreement to retain the public access through the pedestrian walkway. So overall, it is recommended that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit be issued in accordance with the conditions contained within the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there an objector who wishes to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Lino Ritzer. I'm here to speak on behalf of Frank,
Frank Lutzer.
the owner,
Okay.
and what he'd like to say is this. He owns premises 627 Sydney Road, which is on the northern end. Premises at 627 Sydney Road abuts 625. The boundaries of both premises are attached to each other by a shared common two-leaf brick wall. This wall would have a common foundation, most probably constructed of bluestone slabs, but this was the common practice at the time when they built these buildings. This common two-leaf wall supports the ceiling and roof of the premises at 627 Sydney Road, Brunswick. The architectural drawings on display for this development show that the northern side is terminating at the boundary of the premises of 627, in other words, between the two bricks. So we've got the two common bricks in between there. This will require, should this development go ahead, this would require the removing of half the wall and foundation of that existing between the two buildings. This action will result in the collapse of the southern wall of 627 Sydney Road, Brunswick, with damage to property and people on the premises. So what basically is there is you've got a common two brick wall. If you go to the boundary line, or if you touch the wall, or if you touch the bluestone foundations, this wall next door is going to collapse, as certain as this date tomorrow. Okay, number two, we require that this development impose, by the way, you require evidence of this common two-leaf wall. We've taken photographs.
Could you pass the photographs around?
Yes.
You continue. Yeah.
There have been cave-ins of that, exactly that.
Oh, here they are.
Before, but I'm assuming that there's some
Okay.
questions.
That's at the real top of the building, shows us
Thank
two
you.
bricks wide. And if you could pass that
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
photograph, we should have an arrow. That is the beam of the roof, of the actual ceiling, that goes
Okay.
into the wall, that proves that the wall supports
The roof and everything.
Yes, so you've got two-leaf wall, and the beams go into one half of the wall, and I presume on the other side, the other beams go onto that side of the wall. So if you take out the other side of the wall, you've got one leaf, and all the damage, of course, that wall won't last, will just collapse. Do you want me to pause for a little while while you look at it?
Please continue. Yep.
All right. Number two, we require that this development impose no impediments for the future should the owner of 627 consider building up, in other words, requesting amendments to develop his site. We request, he requests the right to build a wall at the southern end that will butt to 625 that in future may block out the sunlight to the development at 623 and 625. So in other words, if these people on the northern end are putting out balconies and whatever, assuming that nothing's going to go next door in the future, well, that I don't think is a fair assumption to make, because if you develop, then your neighbour can develop, and then you'll have existing balconies and light terraces, and you'll have a building next door that will block it out on the northern end. So the council, I think, and the planning should consider that the neighbours also should be given opportunities to develop their side too. Number three, the car parking at the rear of these buildings, which serves the needs of the customers of the strip, is limited and cannot support the additional impost of this development. I've been there, and it's a tiny little car park, and it's got a laneway on the side, so all the customers who come to the shops, to the pub, to all those shops there, they walk through, they park at the back, because parking on Sydney Road is nigh impossible. You go through that laneway, and then you come to the front of the shops. And that car park is very limited. And number four, this proposed development of 8 stories above the street level is far too excessive in streetscape for its neighbouring shops, which are only 1 and 2 stories high above street level. So in other words, if you look at it, and we've been on the roof of it, and you'll have basically on the roof of 627, all you'll see is 7 stories of just walls. It's just monstrous there. Now, I mean, the world is changing and we're getting 8-storey buildings on that site on Sydney Road, but I think that it's just overwhelming for the frontage it's got for the height it's going to have. It's just out of kilter. The proportions are just out of kilter altogether for its frontage. Had it had a more wider frontage, so the ratio of street level to height, it would have been more reasonable. But it's just a little narrow, skinny little thing popping up into the atmosphere. All right, but I do think that point number one is very important. I mean, the others are important, but number one is something you can't go, in this instance, you can't go to the boundary, which happens to be at the middle of two walls stuck together about 90 years ago with hopefully cement, right? If you touch any of them, if you remove that and if you remove half the foundation to go to that wall, or even if you go away from that wall during construction and decide to leave the wall, you've got to be careful on the foundations, because if you damage those, then the wall goes. So I'd just like the planning officer and the council just be duly aware that there may be problems if this development goes all the way at the boundary or near to the boundary. There will be ramifications for the building next door.
Okay.
Any questions or?
Not at this point, but there may be questions later.
No, Your Honour.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another objector who wishes to speak?
My name is Louisa Sun. I'm from Unit 305, 32 Bree Street. For the purpose of reference, my building, actually the east facing facade directly faces the west facing facade of this particular building. So we have a car park that basically separates.
Sorry, what was the address of your?
32 Bree Street. Which is currently targeted as a significant street in the Brunswick Major Activity Centre and has not seen the end of construction for the last few years. The main concerns that raised in objections were effectively three main items. Number one, which was setback, which has been addressed in the report that was filed prior to this meeting. Concerns regarding traffic management, which also has been investigated and discussed in the report, noting the fact that there are still major concerns in the residents in the area because we have had a lot of incidents of nearby resident cars being illegally parked on Bree Street, which is causing significant traffic congestion around the area, and they are very clearly no standing zones. So the question as to whether parking inspectors are actually in the area is highly questionable at this point in time. And then the third one is in relation to the height of the building. I did not put an objection to the original proposal on the basis that it met the DDO 18 in relation to the 7-story maximum height, and noting the fact that there is a building in the area highly visible from Sydney Road, which is of that height. However, the amendment which proposes to increase the story the extra floor is highly questionable because from an architectural perspective, based on the plans I've seen, that particular floor is highly inconsistent with the rest of the building in terms of design and aesthetics. It is questionable as to the particular purpose and reason for that floor other than as a rooftop terrace, which draws the question as to why it looks so inconsistent with the rest of the building and is black, from what I can tell at this point in time, thereby creating a significantly negative visual impact for all buildings that are facing the western facade of this site. And therefore, this is why I'm saying that it has an impact on property value as well, because all buildings on Bree Street at the moment are between 5 to 7 stories high, and this was done under an understanding that there was a mandatory height. Therefore, this particular building being built to 8 levels would not only be the tallest thin building in the area, but also be highly inconsistent with the overall facade that is Sydney Road's main facade at the moment. I note that VCAT approved a particular building exceeding height-wise at West and Duckett. Just like to point out that West and Duckett is not as visible from Sydney Road, and therefore it's not likely to create such an architectural eyesore, should I say, for Sydney Road compared to this one.
Thank you. Is there another objector who wishes to speak? Yes. Or, yeah.
Please state
My
your name.
apologies. I'm sorry. It's just that the pedestrian walkway here is, I'm very fond of it. I've used it for many, many years. It is a significant pedestrian walkway, not merely for access to the car park behind and to Bree Street, but also as a route to Anstey Station. And so the treatment of the pedestrian walkway, I urge you, the plans at the moment look good for it, only commenting upon it, but if any other development occurs, I'd like you to take heed of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further objectors? Is there a representative for the applicant? Yes.
Good evening, councillors, officers. My name's Andrew Gray. I'm a town planning consultant acting for the applicant. Just a couple of things about the applicant. My client, Mr Canatella, who's with me tonight, him and his family have owned that property at 623 to 625 Sydney Road for well over 50 years. They've been a very long-standing Brunswick family. And indeed, if you look at the plans, on the upper level, there's a very large 3-bedroom dwelling, and Mr Canatella intends to be part of the development of this proposal and to live on the upper level of this development once it's hopefully approved and developed. The first thing I'd like to say is, in terms of, I think Mr Ritzie, was it?
Me, yes.
That's right. Sorry. Look. I've been caught a bit unaware by that submission tonight because we weren't aware of that objection. It's not noted in the council officer's report and we hadn't seen it, so it must have been received quite late. But I will address those issues. But I'm just noting that we hadn't been aware of any of those matters, and it's certainly not raised in the officer's report, so it was a late objection, as I understand it. But in terms of this proposal, we lodged this application last August in 2014, and it's fair to say that there's been ongoing meetings, negotiations and discussions with officers over that time, all of which have been very constructive in terms of where we are today. And what we have is a site that is, we say it's a site with some interesting elements. Firstly, it's a site, obviously it's in the Brunswick Major Activity Centre, so it has the benefit of policy support to provide for increased built form and housing density. It's also a site that hasn't got any what you'd call sensitive interfaces. To the rear there's an open car park with about a 20 to 25 metre separation to the apartments on the other side of that car park. It's got the Courthouse Hotel on one side and other commercial uses on the other side. I'd just like to talk about the walkway on the south side, because we see that as a very important part of this proposal. That walkway is physically in existence, obviously, and it's been there for some time, but it's formally not something that's on the council's road register. It sits on my client's title, and there's no easement of carriageway or any other formal recognition of that walkway over his land. However, notwithstanding that there's, I suppose, some debate about whether it's a carriageway or a road or a walkway that is a formal one, we have worked with council to come to an agreement about the future of that. We see it, as noted by the gentleman earlier, that it's an important connecting route between Sydney Road, the car park and the station. It's almost a direct route to the station, to Anstey Station, and it's very well used. And what we've agreed with the officers, and is in their recommendation, is to retain and enhance that walkway, to make it DDA compliant, to light it. My client is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of that walkway, and it's a 24-hour walkway. And we say that that is a significant net community benefit aspect of this proposal in terms of not just those people using the car park, but pedestrians and other people accessing the station. In terms of policy, we say this is highly consistent with the MSS and state policy. It provides housing well located and service location. And what this proposal does is provide a real diversity of dwelling types. It's got 24 dwellings, so it's not a large development. It's kind of almost a boutique development. It's relatively small, given some of the developments that the council sees in that activity centre. And we have a mix of 7 one-bedders, 11 two-bedders and 3 three-bedders, including some adaptable dwellings. So it's a real mix of dwelling types within that development. And in relation to scale, and I note the reference in the officer's report and Mr Melechner's advice to you is that under the proposed C134 DDO, the maximum height proposed is 19 metres, and that the maximum height from Sydney Road on our development is 24.9 metres. But what I'd say about that is that when you drill down to that maximum overall height relates to a very small element of the roof terrace of the development, and which is set back approximately 30 metres from Sydney Road. And if you take to the level below, which is the top of the apartments part of the development, the maximum height is much less than that, about 22.8 metres, and that's again set back about 20 metres from Sydney Road. And those variations in terms of the heights and setbacks was really driven by the fact that with the heritage overlay on the site and the need to retain the single-storey shops, through negotiation with urban design and the heritage advisor, the setbacks had to be, I suppose, tailored to ensure that there was a balance between getting the density and also to retaining that heritage elements of the proposal. And we think that we've struck the right balance, and we'd support that.
Okay. Thank you. Could you please sum up?
Yeah, that's fine, no problems. So we say that the proposal as noted in the officer's report, we support the officer's report and the recommendations. We feel it's a high quality development, and we are supportive of the conditions that have been proposed in the officer's recommendation. Thank you, councillors.
Yes, Councillor Gillis.
I just want to ask one question, and I mean the fact that you may not be prepared for what Mr Lino, His Honour, said before. The reality is that I would like to know about that, because there have been incidents recently where walls have caved in on similar sites. So how do you propose to ensure that his roof and his wall doesn't cave in?
Thanks, councillor. There's a couple I actually wanted to get to that, but I got to hurry up there. But I will. Look, it's always. I think, as councillors know, the planning process isn't about the detailed structural aspects of development. The Building Act and the building regulations cover that. And as you would know, as part of any proposal to demolish or construct on the boundary, my client, I think in this case, would probably have to get 2 structural engineers' reports, but have to serve notices on the neighbour about protection works to ensure that those walls were not going to be adversely affected, and take all necessary steps under the building regulations to ensure that there was going to be no damage or problems in terms of that. And look, it happens all over Melbourne, and there's always these issues about heritage buildings and development and neighbours building on boundaries, but it needs to be addressed, and it can be addressed, and we're confident it will be addressed. The other thing that Mr Ritchie said was about equitable development in terms of what he was proposing on his site, what we were proposing on our site. And what we've done on our development is to ensure that even if that site is developed, the way that our site's been developed is it will not be significantly adversely affected, because we've set back elements of our development from his boundary, so that even if he builds on the wall, his wall's on the boundary, which he's entitled to do, we've got enough setback so that we could get good light and solar access into those apartments. And that was something, again, that the officers had some discussions about.
Well, thank you for addressing that with me, Mr Gray.
Thank you.
I'm more than aware of what I'm able to take into account and what I'm not,
yes.
But the fact is that I'm a resident. I've lived in this municipality all my life, and I don't want to be part of any decision that makes me responsible for someone dying or a building collapsing. No, so I do like to ask those questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you,
And they're
Councillor.
important questions to ask.
All right. Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions for the applicant or the officers?
Can I just make a quick comment?
No, not at this point in time. Sorry.
No.
You've stated your objection quite clearly.
Just for 2
A
minutes.
short adjournment. Can I have moved by Councillor Gillies, seconded by Councillor Ratnam? We'll just have a quick adjournment, and then we'll be right back.
professors, they don't need that, right? Huh? It's there for the professors, they don't need it. Non c'è più da sé. Questo voglio parlare lo stesso. Però vuole, se no te... Quando c'è adesso con gente muore, non sono cagato tutto. C'è anche. Va bene. Dai. Perché non avevo avuto, dai. Lo sappiamo che c'era sto un bicchiere. Io sanno, come faceva la pianta lo spiego. Ma che sa il problema suo? Give up that 56. Just put it down. That's the complete note. That's what I left it there. Nicholas, those photographs I gave, are they going to come back to you?
Do you want them back?
No. I just wanted to explain something because when you get a photograph, it's not obvious. But where you got the brick wall, we proved that it's 2 leaves, right? We took the roof off. And one of the photographs has got brick walls, and you've got this thing, looks like a beam going into the wall to prove that the actual one leaf of the wall supports these. They're massive.
The beam, yeah.
They're massive because they're 18.5-foot span. So what's that make? 6 metre span. So in those days, 90 years ago, the beam would have been about. Looks like you put hardwood or something. It's all old.
So that's all a little bit beyond my level of expertise, like Andrew was saying. It's something that is taken into account as part of the building permit process. They'll need to get the structural engineers on board at that point in time when they do the detailed design work.
But the only problem is, if it's not possible to touch that wall because of these safety,
they might need to come back and amend their plans.
they have to amend their plans. So I mean, and that's part of the planning process to make provisions that don't satisfy these. Because someone I know asked me that very question. Like, I'm a retired engineer, so
You probably know more about it.
yeah, well, I do, but the trouble is I can't come in after the event, in this case there, in Lyon Street. After they've built it, I said, I haven't got X-ray vision, I don't know what's there now anymore, you know what I mean? If you see it before it goes up and you photograph it while it's going up, you can see what damage they've done. But this is an issue in everywhere where you've got these massive constructions.
Okay. I'll seek a motion to reopen the meeting. Moved by Councillor Gillies, seconded by Councillor Ratnam, and I declare the Urban Planning Committee meeting opened again. Now, Councillor Ratnam, do you have Councillor Gillies, you have an alternate to move?
An alternate motion to move. And if I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to read it out?
Yep. So I might just do summary of changes because it is a very long motion. So the summary of changes is that we add, we're reducing the number of levels. So we will be we will grant the permit based on the idea that you will take out the 7th floor and the rooftop terrace. That will bring the plan in line with our structure plan heights. Conditions 5, 8 and 11 will therefore reflect those changes. And 5, 8 and 11 are about environmental sustainable design, waste management and accessibility. We're also going to add to number 14 of this particular motion, and that is that we will add N, and that will be that the protection measures proposed for the south elevation of 627 Sydney Road will be detailed in your plan.
Happy to second that.
And I'll talk to that now very quickly.
Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Gillies.
Look, We have a structure plan, and we're trying to keep buildings in line with that. You know, I am not a great, person for development, but that is the push at this particular point in time. So I have to make my decisions in line with, what the state government legislate. I love the fact that we're trying to retain as much heritage of Sydney Road as possible, because I think it's got fantastic character and it's been around forever and a day. And I keep harping on about this, but I have just got back from France, where they do the protection of their heritage beautifully, and old meets new in the most exquisite ways. I don't believe that does it. I'm sorry, it's not my taste. I do say that a lot. But to me, it's a bit like the Grand Hotel on the roundabout in Essendon, where it's got the beautiful Art Deco facade and then it's got corrugated iron. That to me looks pretty much like that. You've kept a beautiful facade and then put boxes on the top. However, someone will like it, and so that's not something I can make a decision on. I'm just making a personal opinion. However, it is important that we do try and monitor what's good for our residents and good for the neighbours. And yes, the next door neighbour may want to develop, and the neighbour next to them, and everyone has a right to develop under the legislation. So it's our job to try and, have a balance between what our future needs are for our municipality and, what is going to not end up becoming too overly populated with no green space and whatever. Everyone is aware of how hard Moreland City Council have fought for our, to try and get mandatory height controls and all sorts of things. And I think that the compromise of giving you 6 stories as opposed to 8, the terrace top and the 7th floor, I think basically you can still make money out of that, and also still remain living at Lygon Street and have a lovely house for your family. And that's about it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Ratner.
Just very briefly, I just want to firstly acknowledge and thank both the objectors and the applicant for their presentations tonight. I think both highlighted some really interesting issues and some responses as well. In terms of the objective concerns around neighbouring development, that's something that we have to think about quite often, and we've made some sort of varying decisions around that. There's very little leverage we have, or very little power we have to protect future developments. And in fact, it feels sometimes that the sooner you get in, you get more of the protections, but then those residents, if something's built alongside it, will lose some of that amenity as well. So will the future residents adjoining those properties. So it's a really difficult one to resolve, but without those tools in the planning scheme, it's very hard to legislate around that stuff. But we do try to take that into consideration, and there have been buildings previously where we've looked at the light corridors and thought about, well, what happens if there's another building to that scale on that side? And hopefully the apartment design code in some way is trying to ensure that we can have that future protection, because it asks like for like setbacks, so you get light corridors and things. But I acknowledge that's a really significant issue. We have little power to address it, unfortunately. The issues around parking in Bree Street, another one that comes to us quite often. I know a number of councillors in this council are trying to think about how we can monitor and regulate that and sort of improve it for particularly the future residents, the existing residents, but all the future residents that are going to come to that area, which is under such development and pressure as you have outlined. So that's a piece of work that we've committed to undertake as well. It's going to sort of be ongoing work. I don't think in the short term we're going to get a great solution, but hopefully in the long term we are going to get some good results for that area. Granted, a lot of the horses bolted in that area for sure, and we're a bit constrained by what we're able to do now in immediate action, but we are very, very concerned about it. I think the height issue that you brought up as well is a really good one, and it also speaks to the alternative recommendation that we've put forward tonight. On that point, I want to thank the applicants, because it sounds like we've done a lot of work with council for the preceding year, and we really do appreciate that, because you do get much better development outcomes, which is why we want to approve this building. Granted, you won't probably like the alternative that we've put forward, and we didn't have any real objection to the larger apartment at the top and the rooftop terrace. In fact, we thought that was a really nice design feature. We just want to get the height to comply, and it's for that reason that the objector outlined as well. We've just had a recent VCAT decision that cited all the inconsistency between height controls in that area, and we've sort of fought this losing battle over heights in that area, and VCAT citing that our inconsistent risk application of it is now giving sort of in some ways them some license to approve things that are beyond the structure plan. So it's a really difficult thing that we have before us, that every time we approve something above the structure plan, if that's used against us in the next application to say, well, this one can go higher, we just will be in an endless losing battle, which we're trying to arrest at the moment. So I hope you appreciate that's a difficult tension for us. We're just trying to get it to comply to the height level. Otherwise, we were really happy with the proposal, despite some of the other issues that we have beforehand. So we're just trying to reach a compromise, but granted, it might not be what you wanted, but I wanted to thank you for the work that you've put into the application, and we hope this goes some way to appeasing all those concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the alternate motion? I declare that carried. And I'll pass to the Planning Officer to sum up the process from here.
So the Urban Planning Committee has decided to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to the conditions included in the alternative recommendation. Following the issue of the notice of decision, both the applicant and all objectors will receive a copy of the notice of decision, and the objectors will have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal to the tribunal. In the event that no appeal is lodged, a planning permit will be issued, in which case the applicant will have 60 days from the issue of the permit to appeal any conditions on the permit should they wish to. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll declare the Urban Planning Committee meeting closed. And thank you for all coming this evening and your applications and objections.